We're here at Kupka's, right? Okay, we're here at Kupka's again. He's been very, very accommodating. So I'm here with Lorraine Bittner. Do you believe, when we first met, it's 2 decades ago, that the people who really understand issues involving crimes against women and children would actually have a place in government? I mean, when I first was elected, excuse me, we had all these people in government telling people who really know the business, all aspects of society, how they should do their work. We actually sat down, worked together. We had great ideas, and I get credit for a lot of stuff that you did, your idea. But
well, when you first became the district attorney, we had very few DV specialists, almost none. And one of the first things you did was create that domestic violence unit of prosecutors, which then changed the whole landscape of how we respond to Allegheny County and how we respond to domestic violence in Allegheny County in the justice system. I mean, that was huge. And the impact of that is hard to even explain to people, because those prosecutors are in the unique position of being able to educate the judges, right? And help train the police, collect evidence better. I mean, it's made an amazing change, and that continues today. Your DV prosecutors are available 24/7 to answer any questions the police have, night and day. And I mean, I've seen a huge improvement just because of that one thing. I mean, that's not all the other projects we've worked on.
yeah, we've worked on so many different things. When the family unit breaks down, nothing good happens from that. And so when we first met, I remember it like it was yesterday. And you said, look, there's a lot of things that need to be done, and government won't listen to me. And so, we started right away. We did a lot of things.
There's something about the dynamic of domestic violence that is very hard for people to understand. And if folks aren't specially trained to understand that it's about power and control, and that the person they see isn't the person who's committing the abuse at home, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people misunderstand that, and unfortunately, a lot of those people were judges and people in positions of power. And so, until we were able to educate folks more, and that takes specialists that you created, and with your understanding, until you can get people to understand that dynamic, they're not going to properly administer the law, and we're not going to get good results to hold victims safe, to keep victims safe.
But there are so many talented people in this community who've
Yes,
dedicated
absolutely.
their lives to
Right.
children and families and crimes against women and that type of thing.
And I will say,
and you're a leader.
Well, no, but one of the things you've done amazingly well since I've worked with you from the beginning is bring those people together. So we've had a lot of collaborative projects, task forces. If you think about it, a couple I think back on, and some of them were not always pretty, but they were productive, right? Yeah. You had your policy advisory group where you brought together a lot of victim service agencies, folks that worked in hospitals, people that worked with victims. You brought them all together so they could collaborate and be on the same page. You had, anytime there was a problem, you'd call together law enforcement with the victim services so we could all be on the same page. And then through our collaborative projects, you created protocols for police so that all 100, how many do we have, 118?
118 police.
118 different police departments in this county. You know that, what a challenge that is.
Yeah.
So think about how you've worked to have a consistent response. That to me is one of the most forward motions, really, was to get people on the same page.
Thank you.
Don't you think?
Yeah, well, yeah, we made a tremendous difference in a short period of time. Again, going back to when we first met, you were funny in this sense. Nobody listens to us. We've done this our whole lives. We've worked really hard. We need somebody who can try to put people together. And I get credit for a lot of other people's ideas, but you were there.
Let's be honest. You have to have the power and the authority for people to listen to you, and to and to then implement the changes. And that's what you've been able to do. We can't do that. A victim service agency can't do that alone on the outside. We can make a lot of suggestions, but unless somebody in a position of power, and as the chief law enforcement officer, that's what you have. You have the power, and you use that power to the good of implementing these suggestions and collaborated on what did we need, right? What do we need? What protocols do we need? What recommendations? And then you sent it out and called meetings and sent out letters. I mean, when I think about the different problems over the years that we've had in this county where there might be a bad result, if something didn't work well, I can still remember when there was an abduction once and the domestic violence perpetrator kidnapped a victim, crossed different police jurisdictions, and it was discovered through that case that we didn't have a central registry for PFA violation warrants, that the local police weren't communicating very well, right? But you took it upon yourself to work with people to develop a registry of warrants. So now things are totally changed in Allegheny County, where we have one central place and people know about that, right? And you work to improve the communication between the municipal police. And that was, I mean, everybody doesn't do that. Everybody doesn't jump in to fix things, which is what you've always done.
Well, thank you. How about what we've done with protection from abuse?
Right.
It's a piece of paper. We made it real.
Right.
Now, every once in a while we get a bad result, but
Right.
No.
No.
To your point, though, we attack it.
Exactly. So what was done, protocols developed, simple, so there's a policy for police to use and a simple one-page reference, right? And people can use that. It's very practical. I think what we've done collaboratively is really practical. So now police have a quick reference sheet. What do I do when there's a PFA violation of a safety provision? I have a mandatory arrest obligation. What forms do I use? The forms were improved through this collaboration. There's now the central registry I mentioned if there's an outstanding warrant. So a lot of the procedures were improved and the explanation to police on what to do was improved. And then what I think we should all be most proud of is that your unit of prosecutors, and I say we,
No, you were right there.
I'll say
You're
we,
right
but
there.
your unit of prosecutors, domestic violence prosecutors, now prosecute the PFA violations.
Yes.
Right? So not only do we have better forms, better procedures, making it clear how the arrests are supposed to be made, once the arrest is made, we have domestic violence specialists prosecuting the case.
So that was a big change.
That was a big
hard.
change.
That was hard to do too.
That was hard to do.
So if somebody is protected by a PFA, protection from abuse order, and they violate it, a prosecutor would, somebody from my office would handle that violation. So it's a criminal matter. So it was, I can't tell you. The first time we did that, and you and I talked about this, but okay, so you have 50 people in court, and the first person that comes up, he committed a criminal act that violated the PFA, and it was in front of, say, Donna Jo McDaniel. And the judge would look at that person and say, you're going to jail for 6 months. And the sheriffs would take him out, and the 49 other people that were in that room, they were like, I'm not going to violate that PFA.
I'm not going to violate a PFA order. There's a
big
consequence.
deal. That was
Absolutely.
a big deal. Yeah.
Because before that, it was just treated as a family court matter, and it wasn't necessarily, the criminal sanctions weren't necessarily used. So.
How about we're 750 square miles, right, Allegheny County? Just giving people access to city court from remote locations. I mean, that was like, you'd think we were talking rocket science.
Right,
you know?
right.
So it was.
No, that's made a big difference, and not only originally were you doing arraignments that way, but victims were able to get emergency PFAs through the video teleconferencing. So if you were out in McKeesport, you could go to the hospital and file for an emergency PFA and not have to come all the way to downtown Pittsburgh, right? Or if you were up in Natrona Heights, you didn't have to drive all the way into Pittsburgh. You could, as a victim, that was impossible barriers for people sometimes.
So video conferencing was like,
Video
oh my
conferencing,
God,
right.
we can't change government and use
Right,
video.
right.
It was
And the
tough.
other
It
thing,
was tough.
the other thing, when you mentioned Judge McDaniels, when you worked with the courts to implement the repeat batters court, That also sent a message similar to what you're talking about with the PFA violations, because those were all repeat domestic violence batterers
Yes.
that were in that court.
Yes.
And when your DV prosecutors brought the case before Judge McDaniel, and now we have newer judges doing this, but same idea, and she would hold them accountable, the whole room paid attention.
She was the right judge.
She was the right judge. And the other thing that happens that I can't emphasize enough is that victims are supported in those courtrooms now in a way they never were, because there was one case I remember when we started the repeat batter court, when that was started, and your DV prosecutor was in the room. Someone, I think it was the criminal defense attorney, they were talking and had said, well, I don't think the victim wants to proceed, because the defendant, the batterer, had been putting pressure on her.
Mm-hmm.
Don't testify and this will go away, right? And so the victim said, because she was really afraid, I don't want to testify. I don't want anything to happen to him. And your prosecutor and the judge both said, it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's case. It's not her case. She's a witness, but we are moving forward because this was a crime. And then the hearing was held. He was held accountable, sent to jail. And the victim turned to your prosecutor and our advocate and said, thank you. I was too afraid. I could not be the one saying that he should go to jail. But I am so grateful that you have taken this action. And that's an example of what has made all the difference, right?
Well, how about the things we've done here in Allegheny County? They've been replicated all over Pennsylvania. I'm proud of that.
Yes.
I really am proud of that.
When I go to statewide meetings, and I say this, people know of what we've done here, and they know of you, and they are envious that we have had as much progress. In fact, someone said to me from the state coalition once, oh, you're from Allegheny County, you don't even know what we're talking about, because we have all these problems that you don't have, because you have specialists, you have a good district attorney who understands this issue and has made changes. So they put us in our own category. They do.
Yeah, I really am proud of that.
They do.
I really
They
am
do.
proud of it.
Now, we have a lot to do,
Yes.
and sometimes this work is still really frustrating, but I think we're really on an amazing track, and the new team that you're developing, the high-risk batters team that we're working on, is really important because it takes the work we've done. So right now we have all the things we just talked about, plus we have lethality assessment being used, which screens victims. And it helps determine if a victim's in danger and connects the victim for services. But now the high-risk team you're developing flips that over and does more, because it screens the batterer and says, do we have a high-risk batterer? And if we do, we're going to hold that person accountable and find ways to monitor them better, including using GPS, right?
So, unfortunately, tragically, a co-ed dies at the University of Pittsburgh. And that guy should have never been given the opportunity to come to Oakland.
Right.
I mean, he lives in Greensburg, he worked in Monroeville.
Right.
He's going to serve the rest of his life in prison for what he did. But if we can get this thing going, and I just talked to Natalie Mihalik, who worked for me a long time ago, and she's a rep in the South Hills, and I said, this is really important. We got to get this done. So I think we're going to find funding, and we'll get it done. We'll get it. Unfortunately,
Well,
government
anytime
is,
you do something new, right, it's complicated and people aren't ready to move forward. The justice system's slow.
Oh, it's very
So,
slow, yeah.
so people are a little bit concerned about trying to implement GPS for monitoring. And I know there's a lot of loopholes in that, and it's not perfect. But after watching the victims be the one that are supposed to jump through 20 million hoops to stay safe, advocates are very excited at the thought that now we're going to try to put more of the responsibility for the monitoring on the batterer, right? So the justice system needs to monitor the batterer more. When someone's at high risk, we can say to a victim, you should go into a shelter, you should have a safety plan, and we'll do all of that. But in the end, who's watching the batterer, right? Let's make sure he doesn't come to her house or come to her area, and GPS can help with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
So it's another form of technology. I mean, we just
That's
had
right.
a baby that was abducted, and unfortunately by the time we found her, she was dead. But I think to your point about technology, the more we utilize technology,
Right.
the better off we're going to be.
Right.
GPS is, if you want to reduce prison population and you want to make people responsible for their, taking care of their spouse, significant other, children, we can put them in a virtual cell.
Right.
And if you don't want to be in jail, fine.
Right.
But you're going to go out and you're going to take care of your family.
If you just look at that project as an example, though, like trying to develop this high-risk team and use GPS technology for domestic violence batterers, how many meetings have you had over the last year? Right.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot. There've been a lot of meetings, and it isn't finalized yet. But what is the complication? The complication is the same thing we've been talking about. You have 118 police departments that are going to be involved. You need to have 911's involvement, right? You have 4 domestic violence programs that'll work together, but you need to support the victims with different agencies. And you need to have your prosecutors ready and available if they have to go in for bond revocation or to get the GPS ordered. So there's a lot of different pieces that have to come into play.
Yes.
And it's a lot of change, and that's what I compliment you for, the coordination that you've done in the county on this project and all the past projects. It is really complicated.
Well, I thank you for saying that, but there's so many good people that are involved in it. I think the most important thing that we've done together is we changed the philosophy about this is not okay. It's not a private matter. It's a public matter, and you're going to be prosecuted if you hurt somebody.
But also, there's still a lot of discretion. So even if we make protocols and we have all this, there's still a lot of discretion that police have when they respond, and they need good policies and guidance. So the other thing I think that your domestic violence prosecutors have done is do a lot of training. So I know you've organized a lot of regional trainings. At the police academies, we get 20 hours to train domestic violence recruits on domestic violence, and your domestic violence prosecutor is a key piece of that. And so I've watched that over the years, and so the recruits that get the 20 hours then show up later doing a better job when they're out in the field. And then when we have folks, like I trained a veteran class once, and one of the veteran officers said to me, I was explaining how they were supposed to confiscate weapons when they serve a PFA order.
Yeah, that's another issue.
And so I was explaining what the protocols say, and they looked at me and they said, well, we have a little window there. We have some discretion.
No, you don't.
And I said, this is not a joke. I said, I have handed you a letter from our district attorney. I did. Do you remember you wrote a letter about
Yes.
weapons relinquishment?
Yeah, a couple
and
times.
I said, I suggest you read this from the beginning to the end. But that was like having that extra support of the letter in addition to the protocols. That's the extra mile you go that makes a difference.
Well, you remember when we started doing video conferencing from
Yes.
remote locations?
Yeah.
We had some horrible senior judges.
Yeah.
We had to get rid of those.
Oh yeah, well that's a different issue, right?
Well,
that
it's a
just
different
shows-
issue, but it's a change. The change in the mindset is so tough in government. sometimes.
That's why having specialists in different parts of the system makes a difference, I believe. There's something about the dynamics here. I've had a lot of judges say to me, he only hits her when he's drunk. Right?
Yeah.
So they don't understand that it's about power and control, and this person, the drinking might exacerbate the problem, right? But they have an underlying problem where they use violence to control their partner. And when they get drunk, they're more likely to do it. But the fact that they're drinking doesn't make them the violent person. If you get drunk, are you going around punching people? No, I'm not, because that's not our underlying tendency. But when judges do that and fall into some of these myths, right? And a lot of those senior judges were doing that back when we implemented the video conferencing. So they had to be educated about the dynamic, right? People say, oh, they have a problem with anger control. Well, no, domestic violence perpetrators don't. They're not beating up their neighbors. The neighbors love them. The neighbors always say, after a domestic violence homicide, nicest guy in the world. He always lent me his lawnmower. Not to be a little bit, but I mean.
I don't want to hear that. Yeah.
No, but those myths, we have to get rid of those myths. And unless we keep educating people and throughout the system to understand what they're dealing with, we're going to still have victims not protected, not kept safe, and we're going to have batterers who are excused, right? And There was a judge once in a sentencing recently who said they were having a hard time trying to figure out. The person had been convicted of shooting at his wife. It was in a trailer. It was in a trailer on a construction site, and the judge was having a really hard time to figure out what sentence was appropriate, because by the time this defendant showed up in court, he was in a suit, had a grandfather pin on, looked like a really respected member of society. And it was only when they played the 911 tape, your prosecutor played the 911 tape, so the judge could hear the way he degraded, screamed at his wife as he shot her, that the judge said, wow. So it's that Jekyll Hyde personality. And a lot of judges and a lot of people in the justice system just want to believe that the person they see in court that day is the whole person. They don't know there's what we call the private face of the batterer, which is what the victim sees when the abuse is happening, right?
Yeah.
So that's why that education is so important on the dynamics.
Well, how about the, you touched on intoxication. We had that case fairly recently. She's intoxicated. He takes advantage of her. And the judge overturns the jury verdict.
Right.
So we're going through a billboard campaign right now. We got to find the right display, but
Well, that yet again,
it's
to
a
me,
never-ending thing.
It's there's a never-ending. I don't understand it still after working on this for all these years, but there's still a tendency for people to focus on the victim. What did the victim do?
Yes.
Why did the victim do this? And I don't think people understand the dynamics. It sounds simple, but I think it's really at the heart of this.
It was her
right?
fault. She was at the bar.
Right. Why was she there? Why was she wearing that? I mean, we have to really look at what are the actions of the person who committed the crime? That's what's important.
Well, from
And-
first time we met,
Yeah.
no means no, right? No means no.
Right.
They're
right,
tough.
right.
Sometimes they're tough cases,
Right.
but no means no.
Those sexual assault cases are very tough. But when you look just at the domestic violence, it's also complicated because everybody says, why doesn't the victim just leave? Right? And they don't understand that separation is the most dangerous time. That's another part of education. Victims can't just leave, and that's when they're killed, right? So if someone is going to leave, which they probably should eventually, it has to be done with a lot of safety planning, and people have to be patient, and it takes time. And that's what the specialists understand, right? That's what your specialist prosecutors understand. That's what they try to explain to the judges. And we have to all hold on to that and understand that.
So I think we still indict, unfortunately, maybe about 800 to 1,000 cases a year for domestic violence, assault related.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah. Well, you have, just in the city of Pittsburgh, you have 1,200 new arrests for intimate partner violence, not even the bigger domestic violence. We have 4,000 people filing for protection orders in the Court of Common Pleas.
Yes.
Then when you look at how many active PFA orders you have, it's way over 4,000. That's where you can have all the indirect criminal contempts. I think those alone you have around 1,000 a year, just the violations of PFA orders.
I think unfortunately more than that.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of the growth in those numbers is because police are doing a better job of filing the indirect criminal contempt charge when there's a violation of the PFA order. So that's been progress.
I'm proud of that. I mean, that's
Yep.
something you and I,
Yep.
again, when we first became acquainted, the police have a different attitude about this stuff.
Now, our new work around that is on weapons relinquishment and weapons confiscation. And that has we have work to do. We have a lot of work to do on that because, yet again, because this county is so fragmented and we have so many different municipal police departments, then we have a role for the sheriff's department, right? And so it's complicated. And yet again, another example where, because of amendments to the Protection from Abuse law this past year, and the Crimes Code, we're going to have more issues around weapons relinquishment, and the coordination has to continue. Like, you have to keep bringing all these people to the table to work out collaborative plans.
Yes.
Right? That is so important.
And I love Bill Mullen. He's a great guy, the sheriff. And I said, Bill, if you need a couple guys, I'll argue on behalf of your department to get the guys.
Right.
You got to take the guns out of there.
Right.
So
We have to find a way for that communication to be really clear, like who's responsible to take those weapons when they're ordered to be relinquished by the defendant, who's responsible, and what kind of follow-up are we going to have, right? So we have to have really clear protocols.
Well, I think we got to do another training on that.
We do. I agree.
I sent a letter out maybe a month ago, but
Right. Well, the regional trainings you've done have been very successful. If you do
not
one
me. You guys have done
well,
all the
you
work,
set the.
yeah.
They don't come because I invite them. They come. They don't come because a domestic violence advocate invites them. They come when you invite them.
No, I think
and
they
then
want to
we
do a better job.
We work together on it.
We do.
No,
work
they
together.
do. They do. They do. But it's that coordination, and from your level of as the chief legal officer or a law enforcement officer. That's how you get people to come together. And most of them absolutely want to do the right thing. It's confusing. The procedures are confusing. The laws keep changing, right?
Yeah, but I'm proud of that. These guys do want to. They want to do the right thing,
absolutely.
and they want to. And they want to do it well.
Right. Yep.
We got a lot of work.
And actually, the chiefs of police have been really helpful. They're going to post stuff. They post stuff on their website now. And when you bring them together, and then they end up with a protocol, they post it. So I think there's a lot of progress made to kind of connect all this.
So
right?
what do we have to do next? I mean, what's the most important? GPS, I think, is very important.
That is very important. The high-risk team, I think the weapons issues in this county need to be addressed in a very collaborative way because you have so many different players.
Yes.
But we need more clarity around weapons relinquishment. Who's supposed to take them? When do they take them? Where do they store them? How does somebody get weapons back? I mean, that's all. I mean, there's some procedures, but we need a lot more clarity because of the new laws.
Yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
And I think we have to work on the high-risk team and getting the GPS in place. If we can do a better job implementing, identifying high-risk batterers, not just high-risk victims now, high-risk batterers, and looking at what they need. What do we need to monitor these people and make sure they're not have access to the victims, right?
The whole concept of creating a virtual cell as opposed to paying $95 a day to put somebody in the county jail.
Right.
And then you go out and you take care of your responsibilities. I mean, that's a big change in government too. And I'm getting pushback from probation and people like that. It's
Well, it's more trouble. I mean, it's going to take a little more time to set it up, right, and to enforce it, to monitor it. It's a new way of doing things, so people aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, but I went to Guardian to look at their layout, Guardian protection. One person can monitor 20,000 households. One person at a monitor. So
you also brought in other providers to give us demonstrations, to give the police, 911, and the victim service groups information about what's available. So once that's sorted out, whoever the provider is, I think it's going to be helpful. And even though it's not perfect, we will try to protect against errors that happen, or there are loopholes, right? It's not 100% perfect, but it would be a big step in the right direction.
But that's one of the things I'm really proud of. The relationship that we have as a community. But when we don't get the right result, I mean, we're together the next day and we're okay, we're going to get the right result tomorrow.
That's right. Even if the regular meetings are a bit much sometimes, just saying. No, I'm kidding. It's so much.
Strong personalities.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot to do. So it's a lot to keep up with. So your prosecutors aren't just doing their job. I'm not just representing victims in court. I also have all these collaborative meetings where we're trying to develop protocols and implement things through systems change. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does take time.
Yeah, it does.
And you're a great lawyer, by the way. People are scared. I can't use the word,
I don't want to tell you this, but I have more experience than you do because I have 40 years. And that means I spent 20 years practicing law before you were the district attorney and 20 years after you became the district attorney. So I'm actually in a really good position to tell you how you're doing.
And you do, too.
And I do.
You
That's
do.
right.
Yeah.
I will be honest with you.
Which is a good thing. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for
you're welcome.
having some
It's
coffee
a pleasure
this
to have
morning
coffee.
down here.
We have a lot to do.
Yeah, we do.
You have a lot of work to do yet, so let's keep our energy up. Have some caffeine in your coffee.
We'll be good. We'll be good. Just don't come after me.
Okay. Oh, you'll know.
My wife will let you know.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.